instructor space in the school. The site couldn't handle it, the school couldn't handle it. So the option then would be really to pick up that added space, adding back onto the batch, which has some of the problems Mr. Solomon discussed in the historic district, obliterating the fields, the hood school to contain costs. We did things like putting a rubber membrane roof on the building. If you've seen it, it's white. It's to standard now, but I'd like to see that white roof in the middle of the historic district, with that fly there. The cost of renovating and putting the kinds of things you need on the exterior of a building in the historic district, if it was allowed, that would be exorbitant, and again, not reimbursed at all.
So we're looking at going from a building right now with modulars of 24 classrooms, renovating that building, and going down to 16. And if you do the math, that's 8 classrooms of at least 20 children. So you're looking at 120 children that will not have classrooms that live in that area that would either be redistricted, or where would they be? They wouldn't be anywhere.
Well, I think that's correct from the current size. I'm just trying to follow your math quickly.
Well, my math is you have 24 classrooms of 20. Kindergarten goes from 17 to 22.
Right.
Each grade level increases. Some students have 28 in the classroom in the batch, which is not acceptable. And I'm looking at the fact that we have 1 year left on the modulars,
Right.
and I know that we can get an emergency injunction and keep them there. My whole statement is we are going to go from 24 rooms, including the modulars, which really shouldn't count, so 20,
Right.
to 16 in the existing structure. What do you do with 8 classrooms of students, plus even if we renovate? And what do you do with the other 16? There's no place to be. That I feel that the townspeople have to really understand that the renovation of the bachelor school is not an option, because there are 450 to 500 students that will have no place to be for 3 years.
I agree with you more.
I think,
Well,
I know, therein lies part of the discussion and thought process that F.U.M.P went through for several months.
People have to understand and start doing the math.
And hopefully,
You're going from 24 to 16 classrooms, and you still have the same amount of students. There is no space at the hood, no space at the little, to put modulars in their
right,
party.
so one of the things that, again, just glad you pointed out, was, with the renovation of the little school, which is completed, and the hood school, which is underway, that was part of a 3-phase program.
Right.
We had phase 1 and phase 3 that were approved. Phase 2 was a new elementary school, the Swan Pond site. So the 2 renovated schools, again, the core facilities were based upon the renovated sizes that they're undergoing right now.
Correct.
And are not capable of handling the overflow and excess which would be created by an undersized bachelor school in the bachelor school district. And that's why the new school proposition is there. And additionally, cost-effectively, the reimbursement levels are there, and for the other options, they're not. Mrs. Barker, who's the chairman of the school building committee, would also like to just help address the issue.
Thanks, Steve. I think it's important, Diana, to remember that we're building a 29 classroom school for 560 students. That's very important for people to realize. But as many of you know, on 2 different occasions, the superintendent of schools and the school committee and the school building committee invited the state education department and the reimbursement board to come out and tour the Batchelder school and give us their opinion on whether this school would be subject to reimbursement. On both occasions, the answer was a clear no. So I have copies of this letter that I'm going to read. It's out here. I would encourage everyone to take a copy of it. Circulate them, please, because it's discouraging to hear that after 2 years, we're still trying to make this no very clear to specific members of the community. This letter is dated February 28, 2000, and it's addressed to Mr. William Smith, who was the chairman of the Board of Selectmen at the time. Dear Mr. Smith, I am writing in response to your letter of February 6 regarding the planned replacement of the Batchelder Elementary School. As you noted, it has been and continues to be the policy of the Board of Education to encourage the renovation and reuse of existing school buildings, provided that the minimum educational requirements, minimal education requirements, can be met at a reasonable cost. In line with that policy, the department's school building assistance program has in the past provided grants to North Reading for the renovation of other schools, that being the Little and now the Hood. In the case of the Batchelder School, however, the site does not permit sufficient additional construction to accommodate the current and projected enrollment levels. As a result, the town's building committee has submitted an application for a new building. If the remaining application materials are filed timely, that's this June, I would expect to recommend the Board of Education, the town's application be approved. We will not receive reimbursement for additions or renovations to the Batchelder School. It cannot be accommodated on the site. It cannot be accommodated within a reasonable cost. The state does not intend to turn over to North Reading good state tax dollars for that school. We have acres to build on. We have a reasonable cost projection, and we will receive 64% if submitted by June. This was signed David Driscoll, who's the Commissioner of Education.
Thank you, Maureen. One of the other important points, and again, was raised at the selectmen meeting Monday night, was that, you know, the school committee, school building committee never submitted a set of plans for renovation for the Batchelder School, specific set of plans, schematic design plans, for consideration to the School Building Assistance Bureau, and that's why we don't have a definitive answer, and no doesn't mean no. Well, in order to get those plans done, we're talking about spending close to $200,000 to $250,000, and the site visitations by the state officials was called for, and they were gracious enough to come out and lend their professional opinion as to the likelihood of the approval process if we were to submit those plans. So I think, and again, this was all presented to F.U.M.P too over the last couple of years, discussed ad nauseum as to, you know, why weren't the plans submitted, should we submit it, should we spend the money? And again, I want to reiterate, the plan that's being put forth was the unanimous vote of F.U.M.P, okay? And that was last spring, last June, and last week. The proposal that's being put forth, again, continues to be the unanimous proposal to be put forth by this committee, which has been charged by town meeting to come up with a master plan, facilities use master plan. So again, while the criticism may be levied that we never submitted those set of plans for the state's consideration for the renovation of the Batchelder School, it was for two good reasons. One, it would have been $200,000 to $250,000 wasted because the state told us if you submit them, you're not going to get approved anyway. You know, and the other one was, why would we go through that whole exercise and delay moving forward with these projects? Because as we've seen, the more we delay, the more it costs. And again, the plan hasn't changed, the projects haven't changed, but the price certainly has. And now we're faced with the deadline as far as the reimbursement levels. And again, F.U.M.P is very concerned in relation to moving forward on these projects, just so that we can maximize the dollars reimbursed from the state and minimize the impact on your taxes. So, with that, are there any other questions, Mr.? Yes, gentleman right there.
Brian Hodge, 116 Elm Street. I keep reading in the paper, heard it tonight, the Batchelder, let's see, like paint, leaks, heat, roof, everything is wrong with it, but yet F.U.M.P keeps thinking we can rebuild it. If you look at towns like Malden, Chelsea, when they made the decision to build a new school, they leveled the old school. They knocked them down. They were no longer usable. Is it really feasible for us to go through this plan, build a new school, I'm all for that, but why throw good money into a building that's anywhere between 100 years old when we're talking about putting in there is already in a building that's more than usable, requires no additional work. We could rid ourselves of a burden. It just doesn't seem like it's a logical building to renovate.
May I take that one, Steve?
And get away from the aesthetics. Because one thing I've noticed here a few times, I keep hearing the historic commission, the historic district. That's your value. The town is growing, the town is expanding, the town is modernizing. You call it a historic building, it's just an old school. There is no It wasn't the school of a former president, legislator. You know what I'm saying? You're calling it a
Not yet.
historic building, and it never will be at all. But to me, it just seems like we're gonna be throwing good money into an old building that's just gonna drain us of tax dollars every time something goes wrong.
There are two definitive ways to look at that. One is, yes, it's an old building that needs a lot of work. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. The fact of the matter, though, is there are people beyond the Historical Commission, people beyond the Historic District Commission. Frankly, a whole bunch of people over the last 50 years who've gone to the batch, who understand North Reading. And one of the things that I think the 50s and 60s frankly taught society was you don't level your history. Now, you don't save every building, that's certainly true. But when we take a look at what North Reading has, that one district clustered together between the Batch, the Meeting House, the Putnam House, the Tavern, that is a center actually worth saving. Now, if you come to me and say, are you going to try and save every last building in town? While there's a part of me, because I'm part of that contingency that wants to say yes, I'm more sensible than that, and I wouldn't. There was a plan in the early 70s to tear down most of the current historic district, build a CVS and a little strip mall. Part of the problem historically is that was the prevailing view, as I said, for quite a few decades. Just look at downtown Boston, what happened to the West End. Over the last decades, people have learned that certain things are worth saving. One of the important things to look at also, though, is that we still need town facility space. There are a lot of community groups. There are a lot of town committees and commissions. I won't go into a lot of detail, but there are a lot of different people that could use space. You combine that with the fact that it doesn't make sense to destroy treasures. Combine that, frankly, with the fact that at the moment, as a matter of law, it is a historic district. It is protected by local and state ordinances. If the historic district says no, frankly, that building can't be torn down. Along with the fact that there are good reasons not to.
We don't have to tear it down, but we don't have to bear the burden of it.
The problem...
We can do anything we want with the building, but what I find troublesome is that we are going to try to maintain a building that, one, from a liability standpoint, you're saying asbestos, like paint. That tape you did was fabulous, showing all the leaks, the flooding. I mean, you're talking a building that is, look at the library. I mean, we renovated the library and it started up at one figure. Next thing you know, the roof was falling down. We had to put new slate in. We just had to repaint it. Old buildings, you know, yeah, great, they're significant. The old steakhouse would be significant. That school is not significant enough, I feel, to warrant our tax dollars to keep it alive.
It was the first school in town. Until the 60s, it was the only school in town. I understand that there are valid viewpoints on both sides. I think that you would be surprised to find how significant a percentage of North Reading's community believes that that's a building worth saving. There's no point in going into a diatribe.
No, one of the other things, though, it's important to note, is that the makeup of this particular committee over the last 3 years has been very diverse from a whole variety of standpoints and viewpoints, but it's also very diverse as far as the length of residency in the community. I mean, we have some people who are on this committee that have been here, you know, less than 5 years in the community. We have a number of people who've been there between the 5 to 10 years, and then there's been a few of us on there who've been around here for, some people think, much too long. So I mean, as far as the cross-section of the community, and this is one of the reasons why the membership was such as it was, because we had a very good cross-section of the community, we had a very good cross-section of opinions, and we aired them out, again, at great length, a number of times. And I can honestly say, I don't recall anyone, and it doesn't mean it's not a good thing, anyone suggesting that the bachelor school should be leveled because the cost of maintaining it, you know, is too high and all the rest. Now, what is being proposed here is to minimize the impact of that and cut some of that facility off and maintain the oldest and most historic portion of that building, which is what we'll be looking at when we get those designed. When we get those schematic design plans and see what the costs associated with that will be.
And the other thing is, like, what is the dollar to rehab it to a certain use? I mean, it's got to be a ballpark.
Can I
Yeah, Mrs. Kalala.
on a couple of issues. On the question that you just asked, what will be the cost? Part of that will be determined